Hello and welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast, the channel for film reviews, discussions and everything in between. I'm Chris Garner, joined by my co-host George Aldridge, and today, in anticipation for Terminator Genisys, we're going to be reviewing the first two Terminator films in the series, 1984's The Terminator and 1991's Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Before we get into our review for that, we're going to have the week in movie news, and then later on in the show, we're going to have our recommended movie as well as our film fight segments. So, George, why don't we get into the movie news? Looks like we've got a lot of stuff this week, more than in the last few weeks, but what bit of news we got first?
The first thing is probably the biggest news of the week, which is the Spider-Man casting announcement. British actor Tom Holland, who's I think 18, has been cast as Spider-Man for the foreseeable future. He's in the film, I've forgotten the name of, The Impossible, which is based off the tsunami in 2005. And was in a stage production of Billy Elliot for a few years, so he's got an alright acting background, I suppose. He's just very young. And they got a director for the entitled film, who is called John Watts, who has directed two films, which I don't know the name of, and never heard of them before. So it's either a good sign or a bad sign, you never know. But the story is that they looked at over 1,500 people for the actor.
Well, I believe it. I mean, after like the track history of Spider-Man as of recent times, that they've got to get it right this time. If they get it wrong again, then Spider-Man's going to be gone for a long, long time. And it does feel weird that it's getting a reboot so soon. I mean, people obviously have very strong opinions on Amazing Spider-Man 2, but if you look at what it made 750 million, and now we live in an age where a film that makes that much money can still be considered a flop in terms of critically.
Yeah, I think with that also it had a massive budget and marketing, and it made about 100 mil profit, which is ridiculous for something that made that much. But it's just going down and down compared to the old ones. I think in America that was the lowest one box office wise. It just did well internationally, so this is their they will get it right because it's going to be part of Civil War and Ant-Man first. So.
But in terms of this news, I mean, I'm interested. I mean, they clearly know what they want doing with the series this time. It's a very bold choice, getting a director who hasn't really directed all that much before. It was kind of like with the Godzilla situation, really.
Yeah.
You make a couple of your little films, and then you get granted your big blockbuster film. Tom Holland, I haven't seen him in anything personally, so I can't really comment on him. I think it's interesting that they're going that young for an actor, and especially if you're going to be bringing in like Gwen Stacy or Mary Jane and stuff in, you've got to match them with the ages. But I think what they're looking at is, at this stage, Iron Man's going to be finishing soon, your Captain America's, all that. Chris Evans has said that he wants to go into directing. So I think they're looking for Spider-Man to be their next big Marvel property after the films carry on past Phase 3. So I think the younger the better, because they can just keep him in contracts for as long as they can.
Yeah, it's about 10-year cycle you're going to get out of him, and I think it's the right age because you'll see him grow. And then, if comic book films are still a thing, they'll probably have him pass it down to Miles Morales or whatever.
Yeah. And by that time, Miles Morales' characters will have a lot of history from the comic books that they can pick from then.
Yeah, definitely. But it's a risk, but it's going to pay off.
And then going on to our next bit of news, for Comic-Con this year, Star Wars and DC have confirmed that they'll have panels. Marvel isn't there this time, but I mean, it's all owned by Disney, and Disney have got Star Wars, so... well, yeah, you know more about this one than me, so...
Yeah, it's weird it's news because it's so obvious, but I think when Marvel came out and says we're not having a panel, that's them getting cocky about the next set of films. But also, I think Sony and another major company, maybe Paramount, they came out and said they too weren't going to have a panel, so everyone was kind of wondering then. Then Disney kind of came out and said there's a Star Wars one. They've confirmed J.J. Abrams, Kathleen Kennedy, and Lawrence Kasdan. So, clearly something big will happen.
Yeah, you see, with Marvel, they've kind of already confirmed all the next films that are coming out until, like, 2020.
Yeah.
Or whenever, so... They really don't have anything else to show. I mean, they could show some stuff from Black Panther, I guess, but I don't even know if that's properly gone into production at the minute.
No, that's...
Stuff like that. So, I guess we could speculate a bit. What do you think we're going to see from both of these panels?
Star Wars, I don't know. Because I think it's too early for a trailer. However, Comic Con you tend to get the early trailers. Whether they show one trailer and then they release it, say September, October, but I've got a very good feeling there'll be a poster. I think Harrison Ford will pop up, and
Yeah, I think this will be the time we'll get a poster. I don't think we'll get a trailer, as you just said, until closer to the time. I kind of thought that the last trailer we got, trailer 2, was more like a full trailer, but that still apparently counts as a teaser. We may get another teaser just to keep people talking, excited for Star Wars. Um, there'll probably be a big focus on Rebels and stuff like that, I
yeah,
think.
it's
But
all what I've been thinking is that because the merchandise is hitting the shelves in September,
mm,
they say Supreme Leader Snoke has a toy out in September, they're gonna want to have him identified early. So this is where I'm thinking if they have a trailer, potentially it's to do with them releasing the marketing. Because obviously they've announced the Stormtrooper Black Series. That's got like a minor description on the side. So it's
mm.
whether we get little bits and bobs or maybe even a clip. I don't know, but they definitely you wouldn't hype up something that big at Comic Con and not come up with anything because they'll just be booing.
No, and with DC, I mean, they've kind of done that before, where I think it was when they announced or showed the first teaser for Batman v Superman. They had the cast out there
Oh,
at the tables and never let them speak or anything like
yeah,
that.
that was last year. Then when they did the trailer, it exploded because it was just mental. But this year they've announced they're going to be there for the whole panel this time, and they've said there'll
Mm.
be a surprise, which is blatantly going to be like a Suicide Squad trailer or something like that.
I think we'll get something on Suicide Squad. I'm hoping to hear a bit more news or maybe some production stills from Wonder Woman, perhaps, and maybe a little bit of news on Justice League. But I think the push is going to be Batman v Superman. But I don't really know what else they can show. I mean, they showed the Batsuit. We've seen the trailer that's come out. We know what the film's about. Maybe they'll because I've heard rumors that Lex Luthor may not be the only villain in Batman v Superman, so maybe it'll be something like that.
I could imagine I can imagine a trailer because DC are very exclusive. Like last year, they did the trailer, and the one that's got leaked, if you've seen it, that hasn't actually been released as the main trailer. So it's
Mm.
whether there's a similar strategy there, but I think they're going to show off Wonder Woman, Aquaman in action. I think you're going to see a bit more now. Maybe a clip or
Yeah.
two, I don't know, but that's going to be Warner Bros's big one, and they'll probably just announce their films properly. I think, like to the fans rather
Mm.
than in a boardroom.
I hope so. Yeah.
And then moving on from that, that's it of Comic Con. Give it 2 weeks, we'll have a lot more to go through. They've got a name for Guardians of the Galaxy 2. It's incredibly simple. It's just called Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Yeah. This one's a bit weird because apart from Iron Man, all the other sequels to the Marvel films have had a subtitle. And I thought this one perhaps could because this is really just the name of the cassette tape, isn't it?
Yeah, and it kind of works because the soundtrack's the main thing people talk about.
Then again, see, I don't know the reasoning behind it. Maybe this doesn't get a subtitle because it's not a well-known property.
It could. I'm not sure yet. I think also because if they subtitle it, it could be incredibly obvious, or the opposite that no one has a clue what they're on about, which kind of
Mm.
works. But there's not really many famous storylines to come out of Guardians. So like when you name it Civil War or Ragnarok or Winter Soldier, everyone knows exactly what they're going to get. Whereas with Guardians, just not everyone knows it well enough yet.
The only thing is if they go for a third one, like, did his mum have a third volume tape as well?
It'll be him coming to it.
To
It'll be
give
him coming to Earth. He'll like find an iPod, and that's them done for life.
yeah.
But that's it. And then another bit of name news is Star Trek 3. It's now got the name Star Trek Beyond, and that's entered production this week.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say about the title, really? I mean, it's not a massive stretch away from Star Trek Into Darkness, really, is it? It's it's difficult to say anything, really. Star Trek Beyond, I think it's a good title. Again, I'm not a massive Star Trek fan, so I don't know what the reception's been from, hardcore Star Trek fans. But yeah, no, I think it sounds good. I know, obviously, JJ isn't directing this one. It's going to have a whole new team behind it. I personally really liked Into Darkness, but I completely understand all the reasons why people hated it, like the Star Trek fans and how it betrayed and just outright ripped off the end of Wrath of Khan. Um, but no, I'm looking forward to it. I'll go and see it. The title isn't really a deal breaker for me.
Yeah, it's going to be one of them where I think Simon Pegg's writing it. Obviously, he's part of it. It's going to be, and he's a massive Star Trek fan, so I can see a really not a nostalgia film, but gearing up to the 50th anniversary. I could see some like Skyfall-esque build up to it.
Yeah.
Oh, the thing is, obviously, it's not as big as Star Trek's Worldwide, whereas Bond's mainly England for that sort of thing, but it's going to be incredibly aimed towards the Star Trek fans this time, I think.
hmm
But it'll be interesting, I think. I'm not big on Star Trek, but I did like the two J.J. Abrams films.
Yeah, same here. We'll just have to wait and see what it's like. Then our next bit of news is that Tom Cruise has confirmed that he'll appear in Top Gun 2. Oh boy, Top Gun's one of my favourite movies from the 80s. It's just a complete. It's just a film of its time. If you think of the 80s, that's one that a lot of people go to. I really don't like the idea of a sequel, but it seems again it's following in the patterns of other films. I mean, our next bit of news after this, Independence Day 2, bringing back old franchises with popular names to, get more money or whatever it is. And I know this has been in talks for a long time. Top Gun 2, they've talked about the plot and the idea of the story of where they're going to take it. I mean, it's good to see Tom Cruise back because I still think he's a great action star. I mean, we've seen that in the trailer for the new Mission Impossible movie coming out, so we know he can definitely do this. I just question why we need this.
Yeah, I think there's a story that Tony Scott was working on it before he died.
Mm.
Whether they take his ideas from that or do something new, I can see it being incredibly similar to Creed, where Tom Cruise is going to be like passing it down to a new pilot or something like that. But it,
Mm.
it could be all right. I'm not massively keen on the first one, but it epitomises the 80s, so it's incredibly risky to do it. And then moving on from Top Gun, they've got a name for Independence Day 2, which is going to be called Independence Day Resurgence, and they've announced the premise. It's fairly simple. Basically, it's on the 20th anniversary of the original. Um, Apparently, the aliens. I haven't seen the film, so I'm not 100% sure. Before they all died, they're going to have sent off a beacon. And 20 years later, all the other aliens come back. So it's basically going to be repeat.
Bigger, louder, more destruction, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's going to be, and I think it's the same director.
It's the same. What? Sorry, you broke
I
up there.
think it's the same director.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm the same. I haven't seen the first Independence Day. I guess the name's okay, and it kind of says exactly what it is. It's resurging of the original film, the title of the film. Um, there's not many other places you could take the film series, really, so I guess that makes sense, and it's probably the safest way to do a sequel. Obviously, they're not going to be weak because I think they all die by the common cold or something in it. I believe I might be getting confused with War of
As
the
I say,
Worlds, but I think that's how they beat the
that's War of the
aliens.
Worlds. I've never seen the first, and I think it's probably Will Smith just being Will Smith. So
Yeah. As I say, it's going to be bigger, louder. You're going to have lots more aliens on the screen, loads more destruction. Now you've got the ease of computer generated imagery. Because when the first one was coming out, that was still very much in its infancy, and it was a big thing. But again, this is going to be like the Jurassic Park thing. I think with me is that when we first see the original Independence Day, this is all new, and it's really pushing sort of the boundaries of cinema action and destruction. But I mean, now we're so used to it that I don't think it's going to have any kind of appeal to it or shock value.
I think they'll do something where they'll release it July the 4th or some pathetic thing like that.
Oh yeah,
It's just going to
totally.
be like Americanized completely and cheesy, but everyone will flock to see it. I mean, I don't even know if Will Smith's back for it. I don't think he is.
No, he's not coming
But
back
they've
for it,
got,
and I think that's going to hurt the film.
yeah. Although then again, I wouldn't say he can bring in the audience he did 20 years ago. He was his,
No, and we've seen that as of late, haven't we?
yeah, focus from the worst films I've seen in a long time.
Mm.
And then moving on from Independence Day, we've got kind of rumor, which is I've always thought will happen. There's talk that Ben Affleck will direct the solo Batman film, and they want it released in 2018.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this if this turns out to be true. We guess that something like this would have happened when he signed the picture deal. They'd offer him the chance to direct one of his films, or maybe give him more budget for some films he wants to direct by himself. I'm totally for this. I haven't actually seen any films that he's directed yet, but I've heard they're all amazing. Obviously, did he won Best Director, I believe, didn't he? One year,
Um,
or was it Best Film?
he got best film. It is a joke because he won best director of
Mm,
every single award company except the Oscars, who didn't nominate him. So it was a
mm.
massive slap in the face. Well, it's embarrassing for them because obviously he won best film and he won the award everywhere else.
Yeah.
But Argo was fantastic, and I think he's got a bright future in directing,
Mm,
especially doing that. If it's he's directing, he probably knows he'll be calling the shots, and I think that's the only reason why he took it on. He knows that
mm.
he'll be locked into a franchise for a few years, and he'd rather be directing films.
Yeah, and I'm sure he'll completely understand the character. Obviously, it's going to have some studio involvement because they'll be creating the larger cinematic universe with DC, so he'll have some guidelines, but he'll be following Nolan. So I think he's definitely the right man for the job to direct, and I think he'll get it, he'll understand it, and what all I'm looking forward to really for Batman v Superman is to finally see his portrayal of Batman, because unlike most people who are really against it, I'm actually really hopeful, and I think he might be the best live action Batman we've had. Obviously, I'm always going to be a bit biased because Keaton was the first one I ever saw, but in terms of comic book Batman on screen, just from the trailer alone, it looks perfect.
Yeah, it's going to be one of them where I think he's going to be doing Batman. He's going to be older, jaggers, and he's going to be his own one. I don't know. It's too early to say what he'll be like. So obviously, it's going to be the first one that's got a universe with him. Whether that's going to help him or not,
Mm.
because he'd have more to bounce with rather than just Robin.
Yeah.
And then moving on from that, we've got Ewan McGregor. Recently, there's rumours that he's been in talks with Disney about potential Star Wars anthology film for Obi-Wan. He's come out in an interview recently and said that he is interested in reprising the role, which is good news because he was by far one of the best things about the prequels.
And I think we had a similar news piece of this a few weeks ago. Um, and I'll just basically repeat what I said there. I would really like to see him come back and get another shot at Obi-Wan. I'll agree he was one of the best things in the prequel films, and it would be nice to see him now that Disney are in control. And I mean, we haven't seen The Force Awakens yet, so that could be just as bad as the prequels, but I don't think it will be. But if they actually get some good material, the story's good for what they want to tell. If it indeed does bridge the gap between 3 and 4 with Obi-Wan, and they bring him back, it'd be nice continuity with the series again. And he's a good actor, and it'd be nice to see him work with some good scripts this time, a good story.
Yeah, definitely. I think he signed on without a script in the prequels. Whether he would have took it with a poor script, you never know. I doubt he would. He seems like he's got very high respect for himself. So
Yeah.
I think he knows it can be created, but also I think he knows that he was good, not in a cocky way, but the fact that he's one of the main talking points everyone says.
And I mean, we're subscribed to a few Star Wars podcasts, like we watch Jedi Alliance as part of the Schmoes now, and a load of Star Wars fans seem to agree that he was one of the best things in those films.
Oh,
And it would be good to see him come back.
oh yeah, certainly. There's a lot more. I mean, there's 19 years.
Yeah.
How does Princess Leia know who he is? Darth Maul's still alive in the Clone Wars. Anything can happen. So it's one of them where if they get the right story, I'm sure he'll be down for it.
hmm
And then moving on from that, it's kind of getting more related to this week now. So in light of Terminator Genisys' imminent release, unfortunately, director Alan Taylor's come out and he's a bit pissed off. Basically, in the trailer, it gets spoiled that John Connor is the villain, and he's kind of come out. I don't know the word for word, but he's saying he shot that scene and kept it as secretive as he could. That was the surprise, and he's quite pissed off at marketing that they've put that in the main trailer.
Mm. And I watched an early review actually for Terminator Genisys today by Brad Jones at cinemasnob.com. And he says that he was wondering after that trailer came out if that was going to be a small part of the bigger story and there was going to be like another big plot twist. Apparently, no. That's what the whole film is. The trailer basically spoils the entire film, And we've talked about other films that have done this recently because this seems to be a current trend. Um, I can understand him being really annoyed about it, but I don't really know everything that goes on in the work of a director, but I thought he would have some kind of final say as to how the trailer turned out.
That's what I was thinking, because if he's angry, he would have been. If they say, "Oh, we're going to release a trailer," surely he'd watch it first and go, "You're not having that."
Mm,
Certainly, your Nolans, your Spielbergs, all of them have got the creative control. Whether it's the distributors saying, "Well, no, we're going to do this, we'll get more money," or whether it's just his negligence to it. Because he moaned about Thor as well. He was kicking off saying, "Oh yeah, like Marvel bossed me about and stuff." He seems very bitter about everything he does.
and like with Terminator, I don't know how much of a studio thing it was because we talked about this as well. It was having pretty bad word of mouth just based on the trailers alone. No one seemed to be really fussed about it even coming out. So I wondered if it was a studio thing. They were panicking and thought, well, let's show them the whole film basically to try and get people in, than just the initial like first few trailers that came out and the teasers. I don't know. It's a difficult one. We don't really know what went on behind the scene, but I would agree that I would think that he would have some kind of final say in how the trailers comes out or what stuff they will show in the trailer. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, it just seems something that's too random, like whether it's marketing stupid wanting to spoil a twist, or I don't know. It just seems something that to say that days before the release is very sums it all up. And everyone knows. I mean, when they announced the title, they knew it was going to be bad because they can't spell Genesis properly.
Oh yeah, that really annoyed me because when it first came out, it was spelt correctly. It's sort of like what Fantastic Four's been doing when the initial posters were Fant Four Stick and the four was part of the actual title. Now they've reverted back to Fantastic Four. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird with the whole title things with movies. They change them all the time. But move on to our next bit of news now, which is another sort of angry director, but this one for a good reason. Robert Zemeckis, the director of the Back to the Future series, has said that there will not be a remake of Back to the Future whilst he still lives because he and I'm blanking on the other guy's name own the rights to it, and upon the event of their death, we don't know what's going to happen to the rights. It's either going to go to their estate or it will go back to the studios. We were speaking a bit about this earlier, but I agree with you in that a remake's going to happen. It's inevitable. You look at the current trend of films, especially it seems to be a lot of 80s movies actually that get remade. These are the big franchises really with the recognisable names. And Back to the Future's massive, and you look at all other films that have come out around that, they've all got sequels well after the fact or remakes. This is the one that has kind of remained pure, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Unfortunately, it shouldn't happen, but I think it still will. But I agree with Robert Zemeckis with this news at the minute.
Yeah, it's one of them films. I think because it was a perfect trilogy,
Mm.
it didn't really need to be rebooted or recycled, and at least now it's clear who the right holders are and why they haven't rebooted it. But they eventually will. We know,
Yeah.
we know they will, and it's going to be a. I think that's going to be one because that is the film where people are happy it hasn't been rebooted.
Mm.
Whereas everything's been more or less like done since, except that. So I think that's kind of the last one. That'll be like the final straw for a lot of people.
Mm. Definitely. And then our next bit of news, we've had Actually, we had three new trailers come out this week. We've had one for Snowden, one for Creed, and one for Steve Jobs. We'll get into the Snowden one first because at this point it's still kind of a teaser trailer. This is the film by Oliver Stone. I'm not too knowledgeable on the story of it actually. We get a brief bit in the trailer that at a certain age he was in the army, then he was in the CIA, and then he was the world's most wanted man.
Yeah, it's a nice little teaser because a lot of people know the story where Snowden he released all the files, all that sort of
Mm,
stuff, and it's complete Oscar bait. I mean, it comes out at Christmas, which is the perfect time for it. So all of that, but Oliver Stone likes his sort of historical films. He did Platoon.
yeah.
Obviously he did. I forgot the name. A Natural Born Killers too. So I rate him. He's good. And he kind of suits what this film's going to be. 'Cause he's not afraid to give a bad guy screen time and a good guy turn bad screen time. If you know what I mean.
Mm.
I think he's the right director for it, and it's just teasing you of what's to come, just a kind of gentle reminder what's happening. And then I think as we approach Christmas, you'll get one full trailer because a lot of people will watch it.
Yeah, and Oliver Stone's one of my favourite writers as well. He wrote the screenplay for Scarface, and that's one of my favourite screenplays of all time. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. I mentioned this before recording. It does strike me a lot like sort of an American Sniper. It's going to be very patriotic. It's going to get a lot of people talking. I think it will make a lot, but obviously December, it is Oscar season, but also you got that other little film coming out December called Star Wars. So I think it's going to be there for a lot of competition, but this will be the film that people go to see who maybe aren't into Star Wars or the sort of blockbuster type movies.
Yeah, it might be one of them, but I wouldn't be surprised if they changed the date to say like January in England, or push it forward because they want it to make money, but it won't in a
Yeah,
in a in a nice way.
January seems to be the dates we always get the big Oscar films, so it's kind of a mad dash to the cinema like every day, every week to try and get them all watched. But
Yeah, and then moving on from that, I think speaking of Oscars, you get to Jobs now, which is kind
mm,
of the opposite to me, where
yeah,
there was a lot of trouble in production where Christian Bale left. Originally had a different director, I believe, as well. Danny Boyle took it last minute. And also we've had a Steve Jobs film before, Fast and Kutcher, which is meant to be bad, but they said he was great. And Michael Fassbender in this trailer really looks like he's pretending to be Christian Bale.
yeah, and I may be the only one who picked up on this, but for some reason, Fassbender seems the voice he's doing. It's a lot like Mark Wahlberg. A little bit from, is it from The Happening, the one that everyone keeps commenting on when they talk about Mark Wahlberg.
It just seems weird because you get his Irish Germany accent.
Yeah.
He's so like fluent in everything. Then it's almost like he tries to do something else, it's not working. But the film itself, the trailer didn't really do anything. Like I'm not really bothered. Like I think a lot of people know the Steve Jobs story.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, everyone knows the Steve Jobs story, and the trailer itself kind of shows a whole Cliff Notes version of the entire film, really. So, again, yeah, the trailer didn't do anything for me, but the director's great, the screenwriter's great as well. He did Social Network, and that was a brilliant script. I don't. Maybe I'll wait for another trailer, and I mean, I'll go and see it anyway because we might do a review on it or something or whatever happens. But yeah, at the minute, I'm just really not too keen on it, and I think the troubled production of it's going to hurt the film, or maybe it's going to. I don't know. It's difficult to see at this stage, but I think it may have jeopardized the project.
yeah, I think there's too much. If they delayed filming and stuff like that, if they'd have got it timed, because it's got an October release,
Mm.
and they would have probably had a lot better to do with the timing if it had all gone to plan. But I think didn't Fassbender get announced 3 weeks before filming started or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. They had Christian Bale in mind. I think they had another actor as well before Christian Bale signed up to do it. So it does seem a bit all over the place, really. But we'll have to wait and see how it turns out.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's good, but I don't think I'm not as optimistic as I should be, I suppose.
Mm.
And then the final trailer is Creed.
Yes.
So finally, when this film was announced, I was actually really excited for a change. And it's the son of Apollo Creed is going to be trained up by Rocky to become a boxer. As Rocky-ish as that sound, the trailer is completely different, which perfectly suits the tone.
Mm. And this trailer came right the hell out of nowhere. Like I saw it in my sub box, I was like, oh great! Like this is one of my. I'd actually say this is one of my most anticipated films of the year because I love the Rocky series, and based on this trailer, I think it's really smart. How I mean, this is clearly going to be a passing of the torch movie, but it's clever in that I'd say the good first half of the trailer just focuses on the character of Creed himself, and I forgot what his name is in this film, but he's got an absolutely just fantastic name for the character. And then Stallone isn't revealed until halfway through the trailer, and at the point when Stallone's in the movie, when you see him in the trailer, it still kind of takes you back, like, whoa, okay, we're in the world of Rocky. And they have obviously some references to the first one, and throughout the course, like his death from Rocky 4, they talk about that. But tonally, it looks a lot more in line with the serious Rocky films like Rocky 1 and Rocky Balboa. Um, But yeah, I mean, it looks almost sort of like a remake of the first Rocky. But as I say, they're doing it in a smart way, having Rocky train him up. You're tying the old franchise to the new one, and I think it will do really well, actually, this film.
Yeah, Rocky's got a big fan base, and I think Michael Jordan's an actor that's getting better and better. So I think this could be the one where it kickstarts something new. And it's nice to see. I don't know if Stallone wrote it. He's definitely got a very heavy production with it, but it's kind of nice that his ego hasn't got in the way and he's not taking the limelight.
Yeah. And our final bit of news, we've had sadly had another big name in movies pass away. James Horner, the famous film composer, died very suddenly. Actually, he was 61. I remember when I heard the news, it was in the morning, and I saw it on. We subscribed to the Schmoes page on Facebook, and I saw someone post about it there, but I didn't want to talk about it in case it was a hoax going round or it was untrue. Waited till a few more news areas, reported on the story, and it turned out to be true. He was, I believe, he was piloting his private plane, which crashed not far from where he lived. So it just came right the hell out of nowhere, very sudden. And James Horner's was easily in my top three film composers of all time. You had like John Williams, Hans Zimmer, and James Horner was right there. I mean, I talked about him briefly in our top 10 animated films list, where I mentioned that he did a few scores to some of the films I grew up as a kid, like Land Before Time and American Tail, stuff like that. But you look at the list of films he did. He did Avatar. I mean, I know the film wasn't great, but the music was good. Braveheart is easily one of my favourite soundtracks of all time. He did Titanic, which I think he won two Academy Awards for. He did loads of stuff beyond counting Apollo 13 as well. And it's just such a shame. And like when I heard the news, I just got my iPod out, just listened to a bunch of James Horner stuff, and it's a real shame to see him go.
Yeah, it's a shame 'cause it came out of nowhere, and I think that's the worst bit. 'Cause sometimes you have it building with age, but it was just kind of there and then on the news. And he's got some fantastic scores that everyone will remember. So it's a shame to see him go.
I believe the last soundtrack score he's actually doing will be Southpaw, which I think comes out in a month's time for us. So, I mean, it'll be nice to hear that again, and I'm sure there'll be some kind of message of dedication towards him at the end. But yeah, it's really, really sucks that we're having a lot of the greats go this year so far. But now we'll get into our main movie review for the main show today. In anticipation of Terminator Genisys, we're going to be reviewing the first Terminator as well as Terminator 2. So yeah, why don't we get straight into our review?
One came to protect her.
I came across time for you, Sarah.
The other to kill her. Arnold Schwarzenegger is the Terminator.
Terminator 1984 was done. It was done on a budget of 6.4 million, so a very very small budget movie. So where do you want to jump into this one? I think we could talk a bit about James Cameron. Really, I mean, this was his first big film.
Yeah, I mean, this is his like brainchild. That I was reading earlier that he came up with the rights for it and everything. This is all his idea, and then some hilarious story that he sold the rights for $1, just on the principle that he would then be able to direct it. So he kind of got screwed over, but fair play for the company because now they're rich, and that's how it works. So, and then obviously his passion project, it came to life, and it spawned into two amazing films.
Yeah,
three terrible ones. um,
I wouldn't say terrible, but that's a review for another time.
Definitely, but we know what's going to happen on next week's review.
Oh yeah, it's going to be filled with a lot of sorrow, a lot of anger, a lot of hate. Sounds like a Star Wars podcast. But yeah, I mean, the film James Cameron did before this was like Piranha 2 or something like that. So this was his first big break movie. And as you just said, fair play to him if he came up with all this stuff off the top of his head, because the first one, definitely, it's a very simple story. It's like just a hunter after its prey. That's the whole movie. You've got Terminator sent back from the future to kill Sarah Connor, who's the mother of the leader of the human resistance in the future. It's going to try and kill her before she gives birth to John Connor, and then a human, Carl Reese, is sent back by the resistance to help protect her. And that's your plot, basically. But what this turned into, especially with the sequel, it turned into something just completely more than the sum of its parts. I mean, we were going to talk about this later, but I think we could talk about it now. The look of the future world. This is a very bleak and stark look at the future for sci-fi, and it looks great. You've got the whole floor littered with skulls. You got the big robots and the flying HKs, and it does it really well because I won't say you believe this future could exist, but it's very grounded, I would say. I know you got laser weapons and stuff, but there's that great scene later in the film because all this is told through sort of like it's kind of a flashback and a flash forward, really, isn't it? In context of the time travel, but the bit where they go into the underground with the resistance and you see what people are living on, they're having to hunt rats to eat. They're all dishevelled and people are dying left, right, and centre. It gives you that sense of that very oppressive and tense world. You've always got to be on your toes. You're constantly being hunted. And that's what this film really achieves, I think. I mean, tonally, this is sort of a horror and thriller film.
Yeah, and when you get into the horror aspect of it, it's quite brutal, and we'll go into more later. But it is the alien cycle. That's what I call it. But I think with this, when you talk about horror, it's not jump scare.
No.
It's the introduction to the Terminator, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger, which just does all of it. How he's just so unhuman. Like, obviously he's a robot, he's a Terminator, but it builds so well off it rather than these later incarnations. And the version we're going to be seeing in Genesis is going to be really sad, I think, in all honesty.
Yeah, and again, as well as James Cameron's big break, this was kind of Arnold's as well. Before this, he'd done stuff like he did Conan, and that sort of put his name on the map as that. But I mean, you look at Terminator now, and this is without a doubt his most famous role. I mean, everyone quotes "I'll be back," which was a line, by the way, that James Cameron fought with Arnie not to put in the film. And Arnie was like, "Okay, I won't do it," and then they hit record. He did the line anyway, and it's one of the most quotable and famous lines in movie history. So it's interesting to see how Arnold's career has evolved from some of these, like his earlier films. He doesn't get many lines in this, but that plays in too well because, he's the emotionless robot from the future. And he is kind of scary in this film. You were talking about how brutal the film is. This is definitely probably the most brutal one out of all the Terminator films, and I think that's based on the tone of it. There's a lot less comedic moments. There are still comedic moments in it, but none of those come from the Terminator himself, because there's that constant threat that, it could be anywhere. It will always hunt you. Carl Reese has like a whole monologue where he says something like, it doesn't feel pity, and it will never stop hunting you. And that's what I love about this film. And you do see a lot of fans either come down to their favourite is either Terminator 2 or the first one. It's sort of like Alien in that respect, I think.
Yeah, you have two very different films that are similar. They do the same job. But I think with this one, when you were talking about where, he's he always finds you, it's just how imposing he is, and it's the no nonsense when there's the scene in the shop when he's picking his guns, and then he knows exactly what he wants, and he'll get it. And then you can take that, and then you look at him when he's hunting people. He doesn't care if he's in public or what he's doing. He'll just kill anyone.
And you're talking about that scene in the gun shop. I can never remember the name of the actor, but the guy who's the gun salesman, he's in Gremlins as well.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, and he's a really good actor, actually. He came in a few films around that time. But, yeah, do you want to get into the characters a bit more now? Go in depth into them a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of started off with Arnie, but I'll come back to him later. But
well, he is he is on the main poster.
He's the main person. It's one of the first villains that's the selling point, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You get introduced to Sir O'Connor, who is played by Linda Hamilton. And you kind of introduce this kind of like geeky sort of waitress, just like a normal person, in all honesty. And then she's obviously taken into this world where two Sarah Connors are murdered, and she knows that she's going to be hunted down.
And with Sarah Connor in this, what's good about it is, we talked about this before, it's a character who doesn't know anything about what's going on, and we learn the story and the stakes of it and the whole concept of the future world through her eyes. Until the end of the film, we're clued up, she's clued up, and she does have a very good character arc in this film. Um, I'm going to talk briefly about her hair because this film is definitely a product of its time. You hear that from the soundtrack. Compared to the other ones, I mean, you get that awesome opening sequence, and we'll get into this in a bit with Terminator 2. They had full orchestra. This one's very synth-based. It's incredibly 80s. And man, her hair in this film, she's got the big sort of permed hair. It's completely ridiculous, and that will be a point I bring up about does it still hold up. This is definitely a product of its time, but with Sarah Connor, I like her in this film because she's very kind of naive, and she's not the complete badass we see in the second one. But I think you need that because she does. Spoiler alert: she does defeat the Terminator at the end, but even then, she still seems very innocent and like she can't defeat this thing. It's not until the last scene that we see that she's sort of become headstrong and she's got to continue this mission into the future.
Yeah, and I think the moment that happens is at the factory when she's with Carl and she's like, "Get up, soldier," and that's like the first time you see it happen. So whether or not James Cameron had the first two planned anyway, but that was the kind of snapping point where she's clearly like dealing with the situation perfectly.
Mm.
And
then, oh, sorry, carry on.
I was just gonna say, and then I was gonna lead on to her chemistry with Michael Biehn.
Yeah, and Michael Bihn's fantastic. I mean, he was in this, he was in Aliens, and if you've got any video game listeners, he also did the voice for the main character in Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, which was a great throwback to 80s films. Michael Bihn's fantastic in this, and some of the favourite bits of the film for me are him recounting all the events of the future war, and you do get this sense that he's this very weathered, this weathered soldier. Like he's seen a load of stuff. He bottles his anger up, and we see this when he's taken to the police department, and he can just flip out at the moment's notice. It's sort of like post-traumatic stress as well when he's trying to sleep in the car and he hears it's like a bulldozer or a crane at a construction site, and it takes him right back, and there's a brilliant transition from the wheels of the digger as it fades into the wheels of one of the future robots crushing the ground of skulls. Yeah, he's brilliant in this, and we'll get into this in the Terminator 2 review, but he also gets a pretty neat little cameo in one of the deleted scenes from that movie as well.
Yeah, and I think the way I see it, because I saw this when I was younger, and this was the first time I've seen it in a long time, I'd seen Aliens, like, I'm far more familiar with that. So it's kind of like, oh my god, Hicks is Kyle Reese. Because Kyle Reese is the one that everyone goes on about. And then to properly see him was kind of cool, because it could so easy for him to be like a lifeless jerk or anything like that, but when he comes on screen, he's incredibly believable. And I think him and Linda Hamilton bounce off each other so perfectly for the roles they're doing, which is my main fear about Genisys, sorry to say it again.
Yeah,
But
no, well, that's what I was going to lead on to, actually, because just from the early review, I know we can't base all our things on early reviews, but I trust these reviewers. They say that there is pretty much no chemistry between Emilia Clarke and Jai Courtney, so we'll have to wait and see, though. But yeah, you're not going to top Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton, though, and that's just the problem you're going to run into it. But anyway, I don't want this to be a Genisys review. We haven't seen the movie yet. That will be out next Monday.
yeah, be prepared.
Yeah. So that's really your main cast of characters, really. It's kind of these three people. You get supporting characters. You get the awesome like chief of police at the police department. He's brilliant. He's like constantly smoking, and one of my favourite bits in the movie, it's such a little moment, is he says like, "Pass me a cigarette" or something, and he gets given the cigarette, and he's also got another one in his other hand. And then you get Dr. Silverman as well, who kind of plays into the film more in the second one. But as I say, it's a very simple story, small cast. Obviously, there was the small budget, but going off the budget, if you want to talk about the effects in it, because they do use a lot of practical in this film, as well as stop motion towards the end. But there's one scene in particular that I want to talk about, which is perhaps the scene that hasn't aged the best out of the entire film, which is when Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, is trying to take out his eye because it's been, he's got a dead eye now, basically after a crash. And the close-ups are actually an animatronic of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's very, very apparent now. I don't know how it would have looked at the time that it is an animatronic and not Arnold.
Yeah, that's the first thing I saw earlier when he clawed that. I was like, this looks stupid. Because obviously back then you couldn't have a robotic eye on someone like that. It would have had to be fake, but it really didn't look good. I mean, back then they would have noticed this still back then. Would it have been groundbreaking? I don't know. I wasn't alive. But the stop motion stuff sort of works perfectly, I thought, though, as it continues towards the final scene. And that's the bit I liked, because that was legit. And the Terminator kind of looked terrifying in stop motion compared to the modern CGI or like proper animatronics we see.
Yeah, and because it's a robot, the stop motion works well with it because it's going to have those jerky motions, but it still is a little bit jarring when you cut to a close-up and it is the practical sort of lumbering T800, and then it'll cut to a wide shot and there's that scene where Sarah Connor's trying to slam the door before the T800 catches up to her at the door, and it's like a projection, like a blue screen or something. So there are parts where it doesn't quite blend well, but I remember seeing some behind-the-scenes footage of Arnold on set looking at the animatronic of himself for that one scene, and he said at the time that was groundbreaking, and everyone was saying like how lifelike it looked. It's kind of funny now looking back, like that. I remember seeing this film for the first time, and that was one of the things that jumped out to me immediately. But I guess that kind of, it does date the film, definitely, and if that doesn't, the soundtrack certainly does. The soundtrack is great, though. Brad Fiedel did the music. It's very synth-based, but the main Terminator theme is a classic, and then that obviously gets ramped up in Terminator 2. So I guess we could talk about our favourite scene if you want, or favourite scenes. Just list as many as you want. So have you got any in particular?
Yeah, the bit I like most is the police station, and it's kind of a double header. I love Michael Bihn's like screaming and shouting. There's the cops that don't believe him, and they were saying he's a nutcase. But that's kind of cool because at this point Sarah Connor believes him so much, and no one else will see the obvious. But then it's when Arnie comes in, and he hits "I'll be back." The only time it's ever been said decently, I think.
Yeah.
Rather than some nonsense like Easter egg. Then he obviously comes in, drives in, and kills everyone, and it's just awesome because you get some likable cops there, and they just have them all obliterated. And this is when you get to see the Terminator like in action properly for the first time, just doing what they'll be doing in the future.
Yeah, and you were talking about the "I'll be back" line. It's funny how that's sort of the catchphrase now, that's just rehashed and reused in all of the sequels. But that line wasn't actually used, to my knowledge, in Terminator 2, because that was very much "Hasta la vista, baby," which was the catchphrase for that film. But ever since then, like even in the trailer for Terminator Genisys, they're still doing the "I'll be back" thing, and that line's just been parodied in about everything now. Like even Expendables were like riffing on that line.
Yeah, and it works in Terminator. In all honesty, it works in the event. I loved it in Expendables too. I won't lie.
Oh yeah.
But like in some of the other ones, it's kind of like, what was the point? It's just you just want it.
Yeah, like in the Genesis trailer, I was just kind of rolling my eyes at all these callbacks and stuff to the originals. I was like, okay, let's just move on. Like we're all so tethered to these first two. They're just not. They're not advancing any of them. Like with Terminator 3, and I don't want to get in depth into Terminator 3 now. That will be a review tomorrow. But that was very much sort of a remake of the second one, and then Salvation rolls out, and it's going back to the future war, but it's also the whole Kyle Reese thing again. And then Terminator Genisys, from the trailers, it looks like they're taking the cliff notes of all the previous ones and then just regurgitating and rehashing it into a new movie. So it's like, this is definitely the one that started it all, and for some reason they just keep rehashing all the stuff from this one. But I think that goes to show that this is one of the strongest ones. I still prefer the second one overall, but if I'm getting into my favourite scene, my scene's actually the part where she goes to the Tech Noir, and it's like a really cheesy 80s song playing in the background, and she kind of goes to the back and sits in a booth, and it cuts between her sitting there trying to hide. And beforehand she was stalked by Kyle Reese, who's trying to protect her, but she doesn't know that at the time, and also the Terminator as well, and she doesn't know which one it is. It could be either of them, and it's sort of in slow motion as he's stalking across the dance floor and he's surveying the area to try and find her, and then there's a brief shootout. I just love that scene. I think the pacing of that and the slow-mo really works well. Although I'm not sure if it actually was filmed in slow-mo, but it does look like they just asked all the dancers to dance in slow motion for that scene.
Yeah, it was worked really well, I thought, though, because you had the tension going of looking there, and the kind of going, and it's when he pulls the gun out, it's super slow, and then Kyle Reese just gets there in the nick of time twice, 3 times.
And I believe that was after her friend had been shot as well, whose name escapes me, who has the absolutely fabulous portable cassette player.
Oh, her friend gets obliterated, which is hilarious. I mean, like, you talk about Terminator, like, he shoots her in the head, point blank, but then he just keeps going with the body.
Yeah.
But then she was so annoying, which I'm so happy she died. It's very typical, she misses the phone call, she's with a mate, and then it all goes apeshit.
But I guess this just leaves to the final question for our review on Terminator 1. Do you think it still holds up as a film?
As a film, no. As a Terminator film and an 80s classic, yes. It's a cult film, and watching it was still great fun. Although it is dated now, however, it still is one of the 2 good Terminator films, and it looks 10 times better than most of the other ones.
I still think it holds up, but it is definitely dated. Not that that's a bad thing, but I talked about this. The soundtrack's very techno-based. You just look at the way people are dressed and the hairstyles and everything like that. It's definitely a product of the time, but it had some lasting power. I mean, if we've got a new Terminator film out in the year 2015, it's done something right. I still think it's a great thriller suspense movie. It's a lot different to the other ones. They went very more action-based or sort of the PG-13 route, so I still think it's a solid watch, but just be prepared because at first the music may take you back, but I still think it's a solid watch, definitely one of Arnie's best, and it's nice to see where his career sort of started from. A good action movie, but if you want a Terminator film for the action, then you watch the sequel, which we'll review now.
Once, he was programmed to destroy the future.
You don't know what it's like to try to kill one of these things.
Now, his mission...
Get down.
...is to protect it.
Mom!
Come with me if you want to live.
His enemy...
He's a Terminator like you, right?
Not like me.
...is the deadliest machine ever built.
Can it be destroyed?
Unknown.
This time, there are 2. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Terminator 2, Judgment Day. This time, he's back. For good.
Trust me.
Terminator 2 Judgment Day, 1991, set 10 years after the original. The tone very much shifts with this one from the horror thriller cat and mouse chase to an action orientated cat and mouse chase. So I guess I'll start off with saying that this was actually the first Terminator movie I ever watched as a kid, and I just used to watch this film on repeat. I loved it, and then I think this was just before Terminator 3 came out. Then I went to see that, and then I went back and watched the first one. At first I didn't like the first one, but then it grew on me over time, and as I got older and I appreciated for the tone and style of that film was. But man, Terminator 2, if you saw our top 10 favourite films of all time, this was in my list. It is my favourite action movie of all time, because it does have the perfect blend of just fantastic action, practical effects action as well, and great characters and themes and character-driven moments.
Yeah, and then what's different? You said that was the first one you saw.
Mm-hmm.
This is the last one I saw. The order I've seen is bizarre. Mine was 3142 over a spread of about 6 years. So
Wow.
It was kind of
Well, you
the
saved the best for last.
exactly
Arguably.
everyone was going on. It was like Jurassic Park. Everyone goes on, and eventually I got around to it. And then I remember saying, like, "Wow!" When I first saw this, I was loving it so much. And it's great fun though, and it works so well in itself because it ups the stakes, it changes it all, and it pays off and it's better than the original.
Mm. But what strikes me is, I mean, the opening scene is just fantastic. After your awesome title sequence with the flaming playground, and you get the classic look of the exoskeleton looking through the fire, we get the scene at the bar, and after Arnie does some just great one-liners in there and famous sayings, he comes out, and then Bad to the Bone starts playing. And right from there, you can kind of see the tone change from there. Because at that point in the movie, if you're going into this straight after the first one, the first like 10-15 minutes of this film, you don't know if Arnie is still the good or bad guy. Like, he could be another evil Terminator sent back. But when that song kicks in, I don't want to say it's goofy because I do love that scene and that music and that placement. But you can sort of see where it was changing from the R rating to a more PG-13 area. Like, it was a bit goofy, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, and then whether it's toned down, the only violence you see is on the T1000, and obviously because obviously it does what it wants. It's like liquid metal.
Mm.
It's kind of like if it's gonna have a gory bit, it's maybe his head split in half. You can't have that with a human, but you can have it with this robot because it's not real. So it's one of them where it plays off that a lot. However, it still has its moments. One that springs to mind is the stepmom of John Connor.
Yeah. And she stabs it through, the stepdad's head, which is, it's a really cool reveal, because at that stage you can kind of sense that something's off. I mean, he talked about earlier, Arnie's character, that the T1000, which is the evil robot in this one that's after John Connor, it can replicate anyone it comes into contact with, and we see earlier in the film he's disguised himself as a police officer. He goes to the house, so you know he can now. And it's sort of in her acting, you can sense that something's not quite right, and then you get that pan to the right. Also, you've got the dog barking outside, which is a real cool carryover from the first one, where they say that dogs are the only things that can spot the Terminators.
Yeah, because in the first one you've got the dog barking as well. When he's approaching his first Sarah Connor kill, she keeps barking and barking at him, and it's a nice sort of throwback when they do stuff like that.
Mm. And then I guess we can sort of get into the effects, I suppose, after this, and then we'll get into the characters some more. With the increase in action, we also have to have an increase in the threat level from our bad guy. And that in this one, this is with Robert Patrick as the T1000, who is a fantastic bad guy, and he's a brilliant performance in this. And it's one of the most creative bad guys I think you'll see in any film. Basically, he's made of liquid metal, so you can shoot him or blow him up or whatever, and he'll turn into little liquid metal pieces, and it will just fuse back together. He can shapeshift, he can change into anyone. So the stakes are higher in this one, which is just a natural progression of any series or any sequel. And at the time, the effects for this were just groundbreaking, the whole morphing animations. And you still watch it now, and there might be a few bits where the textures don't look great on it, but at the end of it, it's just sort of a silvery silhouette of a man, so I don't see how you can go far wrong with that, and it still does look great. And to be honest, it even in some respects looks better than what I've seen in the trailer so far from the liquid metal Terminator and Genisys. And I don't want to keep harping on Genisys because we'll need to save that for the review, I'm sure. But no, and I think it actually won an Academy Award for its visual effects as well.
Yeah, it did, and this is one of the groundbreaking ones. Recently, I did a massive project on technical convention in the past like 34 years. Anyway, first thing that cropped up was David Cameron. That's the wrong person. James Cameron on The Abyss. He had, I think, the first use of motion, sort of not motion performance, because obviously it's not like the suits, but it was the first like use of it with the water thing. And then when you get to the new one, it was heavily detailed. And I can't remember the exact term because it was a month or two ago. but it was the first film I think to have complete CG motion capture of a human.
Yeah.
And the way it works, and this is so good still. I mean, we're talking about the hold up. It still works because you see the bits that they'll have one bit of practical effects, but then it uses the CG when it needs to. I think that's what plays into its favour and makes it intimidating.
Yeah, I was going to mention that bit. It's the scene that comes to mind is where he gets shot through the head, and there's the big sort of silver crater in his face, which when it's just on his face, that's like a practical bit of makeup, and then it'll cut to the CGI of it morphing back into a head, or even at the end, where spoiler alert, the T-1000's just about to get shot, and he gets blown up, and it's this awesome puppet of this just the T-1000 just split in half, and he's just kind of screaming, and it reminds me a lot of The Thing actually, how that last bit. But you're right, it's that blend. If you can get a blend well of practical and CGI, it looks great. And another one of the scenes that still wows me is the bit where he's blended in with a checkered floor in the mental institute, and he morphs out of the floor. It still looks great.
Yeah, and there's a lot of it that does, and it's kind of one of them where, because it was so new at its time, it's arguably one of the best uses of it as well. If you know what I mean? And then when you come back and see it, it's really awesome, and they use it in a way which suits the tone in the film. It could have been incredibly easy for them to have had a wrong character using stuff like that. I had a sort of Jar Jar Binks was the first motion capture character. Everyone thinks Gollum it was Jar Jar, but whereas this one, the first one was the best one.
Yeah, and I guess from there, we probably should have gone into the plot, but I think a lot of people probably have seen this film, and it's a very similar plot to the first one, really, in that a new evil Terminator is sent back from the future to kill John Connor. Now he's 10 years old. John Connor has rewired a T-800, which is Arnie, and sent him back to protect her. So it's very similar, but they do a lot of neat character arcs with people and take people in a different direction. So I think we should get into that now, and we'll start with Linda Hamilton this time, because her character sees definitely the biggest progression between films.
Yeah, and if you look at it, the 10 years, i.e. the 10 years on screen, what it is, since that, when you're introduced to her in the new one, she's pumping iron in like the mental institute, and she's gone from the kind of girl on the night out with her mates to this like war machine, like she's ripped and everything, and you kind of like, wow, it's like, is this the same character? Because they probably could have recast her, in all honesty. They could have done something like that. They probably would in modern day, but in this, it's just like when you first meet her, it's so awesome, and it's so like obvious what's happened since, and that she's preparing for the return of a Terminator.
Yeah, and all you really need to do is just compare each of the first shots of her from the first film to the second film. The first film, it will be her on her push bike going to work in her waitress outfit, and then the first shot, as you said, her pumping iron in the mental institute. And just if you're looking for a few images of comparison, you just look at those two. She's very much become how Kyle Reese was when he was in the police institute on the interrogation videos. She's really intimidated in this film, actually, especially when she turns around and says like, "Hey, Dr. Silverman, how's the knee?" Like stuff like that, and then again in the interrogation where she just completely goes insane. But yeah, she's almost unrecognisable in this film, and how she acts, she's not the same person at this point. She's completely become driven by ensuring her son's safety and making sure she can do everything in her power to stop Judgment Day from happening. And to the point where at the end, this is jumping towards the end of the film with Miles Dyson. She goes on this hunt to kill him because she thinks that if she kills him, then she will stop Judgment Day from happening. So, and there's that great realization where I think the wife and the son of Miles, after he's been shot, are kind of crying over his body, and then she gets that realization, and I think her son talks her down, because she'd almost become a Terminator herself at that point.
Yeah, because there's the bit when she's going to kill the guy.
Yeah.
And, she's got no shame in doing it, to do whatever she can to stop the future, and she basically is the Terminator, right? And That's how her story arc's gone from the weak thing to this beast, and then she eventually gets toned down. She realizes she doesn't have to kill someone to change the future.
And not only that as well, and we'll get into Arnie next, but at the end, with that handshake in the ending, she even finds an acceptance with the Terminator.
Yeah, and I think that's the main point, because when she's first introduced to him, she's seen pictures of him, and it's, oh my god, it's the same guy that was going around with them years ago, and she's always on edge, and it builds nice that, because you always thinking, the first time I saw this, I knew Arnie was the good guy this time round, but I always thought he'd double crossed them, similar to what the Terminator Salvation ending was meant to be. But the fact that he never does, but it's something you kind of think in the back of your head the whole time.
Yeah, and I mean, there's that great bit where we know at that point he's a good guy, but when they break into the mental institute to rescue her, and Arnie rounds the corner, and she just like stops dead in her tracks and screams and runs off because she doesn't know that he's a good guy. And I think we'll get to Arnie now, because obviously in the first film he was the emotionless robot who was constantly after them. He was a threat. In this one, he's the protector, and he's learning about humanity. And there's actually a few scenes from the deleted scenes. I think we're kind of doing a review on the extended version, the director's cut special edition version, because that's got a lot of great scenes in it. There's that moment where John's trying to teach him to smile, which seems like they've referenced in Genisys, and it just comes across as goofy. And there's like he's teaching him sayings and like thumbs up and high fives and stuff like that. And it's great. I love the interaction between John Connor and Arnie in this film, because Arnie is a father figure almost to John Connor.
Yeah, and that's what it's this kind of like nice play off you get between them, because he'll be like, "Oh, you've got to do everything I say," and he's like, "Yes," and it works quite well. Normally in them situations, I really like get bored quickly, because I'm not keen on Edward Furlong as John Connor, but it has its moments, and Schwarzenegger, he's so similar but so different to the first film, and it suits him better, I think. Like, as intimidating as he is, he kind of comes across as this like big, nice guy at the end of the day.
And since then, that's the character he's played in all of them. I mean, I know he wasn't in Salvation properly, but in 3 and Genisys, they've still gone with that protector route with the character, and I do think it works. And I guess from there, you mentioned Edward Furlong, like you weren't too keen on him. I thought he was brilliant in this film. Like, a lot of kid actors annoy me, and I guess I can kind of know what you mean. Like, he has that certain voice when he's like shouting for his mum and stuff. But I thought he was a really good actor in this, actually.
It's just one of them where I'm naturally like not comfortable with not comfortable, but I just get very bored quickly, and it's just got all the whining stuff, and it's one of them where it could have worked. It would have been a lot better if he was maybe 17, 18. He knew about the Terminators. It could have had a so much better dynamic. But I can understand picking him as the younger one.
But it all builds to that ending where, they've destroyed the chip, they destroyed the arm, they think Judgment Day's over, is averted, and then Arnie says that no, there's one more chip which is inside of me and it has to be destroyed also. And then John just breaks down, and the best line in the film for me is when Arnie says, "I know now why you cry, but it is something I can never do." Because it's that moment that Arnie, he discovers humanity, and he understands it, but he knows that he's not capable of that because he's a machine. And it's also the moment that John Connor, who's the one guy who's been like a father to him, he has to let him go.
Yeah, and like bits of that work, and it's that's some of its strengths though, because you can sort of feel the emotion growing, and it gets it spot on for that. You don't get too much of it, but you don't get little enough so you don't care. And it's one of the things that James Cameron can play perfectly. 'Cause as much as I dislike Avatar, it gets some of its moments like that right, and you see it in stuff like Titanic. So he knows how to like get the emotion, like sort of connections out, and especially Aliens as well.
And I guess the only other character we can talk about is the T-1000, and we've talked about him briefly in the effects, but Robert Patrick is just brilliant in this film. He's really intense, and he's a lot different to how Arnie played it in the first one, because Arnie was physically imposing as well, whereas the whole concept of the T-1000 is he can't be. He's got to look just like an average person, but then again, he can just transform into anyone he wants to. So he's got that, like he can just be anywhere, and the whole liquid metal aspect as well, which we've talked about. He is a brilliant threat in this film, and I think he's definitely one of the most iconic bad guys, perhaps, just like his look in the cop outfit, and he has the very stoic and unemotive face, which again you need because he's a robot from the future.
Yeah, and that's what I really like about him, because he's not as intimidating as Arnie, so they take it the different route. But it's almost the military presence I feel with him, and then when he gets the sort of cop stuff on, it's working well. But when you first introduced to him, he's got the Kyle Reese build.
Mm.
And to people, obviously I knew what the twist was. Some might have at the time because the trailer spoiled it. But it's kind of like, would people think he's almost the new Kyle Reese? And you know he's kind of bad, but not the villain until there's that moment with Schwarzenegger when they're face to face in the corridor.
Yeah, and we'll get into action scenes in a bit, or favourite scenes, but all of the action in this film, especially the fight scenes between those two, are brilliant. And when you see them fighting in the corridor and they're slamming each other into walls, and the walls are like cracking and they're putting each other through walls, you do get the sense of how weighty these robots actually are. They may just look like average guys, but you realise that they're made of, like, a hunk of metal.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like at the time, then you didn't really see that a lot. Whereas nowadays, people fly through walls because they want them to look tougher. Whereas with them, they're like machines. They're like proper out and out, like warrior type, gonna kill you iron. Whereas it works perfectly in this, and since that, it's kind of a gimmick you see so often nowadays, where they'll just keep flying through stuff.
Yeah, and just one other scene I want to mention, because this is sort of exclusive to the special edition version. It was the return of
Kyle Reese.
It was the return of Kyle Reese, Michael Biehn, in one of the deleted scenes in the Mental Institute, and I do think this is a really, really it's not a key scene, because obviously the plot still makes sense in theatrical, but I do think it's a very nice inclusion. It's where Linda Hamilton's having doubts and she doesn't think she can do it, and it's sort of like a dream sequence, and Kyle Reese appears to her and he does the whole "on your feet, soldier" again, which then sets her up for the rest of the film, where she's just as determined. And then I guess we could get into favourite scenes now, perhaps, or like talk about the action scenes as well. One of my favourite scenes is the payoff to the build-up from this dream sequence, is where Linda Hamilton is having a nightmare where she walks up to this playground, sees like all the mums and the kids playing, and that's when the nuclear bomb goes off and all the kids are like turned into ash, and she's screaming and banging on the fence to try and warn them. She just ignites in fire and then turns into a skeleton and explodes. It's so creepy and eerie how it's done, but it's really well. It shows you what could happen if Judgment Day ever does happen.
Well, exactly, and that's where you get the sort of shift tone from the first one. You only really get like one moment like that in the first, when the woman gets like blown up by the gun, which you can see coming by a mile off. Whereas in this, it's kind of it's slowly coming up to get you. But then I think my favourite scene is it's a cool one. It's when the T-1000 gets frozen and they start shooting it as the shotgun.
Yeah.
And then when I first saw this, I was there like, oh, is that it? Like, 'cause it was almost finished and stuff. I thought that was the finale. But it's when it starts, the bubble comes and it all goes back into liquid, begins to reform. And it's this really cool build-up. It's nothing special action-wise, but seeing that kind of moment when they're all shitting it as well, and then he's just like fully formed and just carries on. It was so cool.
And it, that's similar to the first one, where they place the dynamite in it and it blows up, and she thinks, oh, it's over, but then it still gets up even when it's half a robot and then crawls after her. Like, you realise that these don't stop, but with the T-1000, it's the fact that how it's built, like, you hardly think that anything can take it out, and it's the only thing that can take it out is where they push it into the liquid steel, and they burn him, which, to be honest, is what I'm feeling like tonight, because it is incredibly hot here in the UK.
I know, it is. I'm still melting, and there's like some fucking like dad on long legs that's just flying around my legs now, so I'm just bottling it.
Yeah, same. Like I feel like the T1000 right now, just swimming in that liquid metal. Um, but yeah, I guess I know what the answer's going to be to this one. But do you think it still holds up?
Terminator 2 does absolutely, and it's still one of the best action films ever made.
Yeah, I will completely agree with that. The action's phenomenal. Some of the stuff they do. One of the scenes that comes to mind is the truck chase where it's chasing after the bike. That's really intense. The music by Brad Fiedel again, full orchestra this time. The themes for the T1000, it's like a sort of low drone from a synth, and then you get all the epic music, the Terminator theme. Um, this one, I think, as a film, stands up a lot better than the first one to watch to a sort of modern audience. The characters are taken in a lot of awesome ways. The characters kind of completely turned on their head. The threats ramped up. The action's more intense. It's more emotive, and yeah, it definitely deserves its place on one of my top 10 favorite films and my favorite action film of all time.
I'll be back.
And that was our main review for today's show. Now, I know we still have to talk about Terminator 3 and Salvation, but what's going to happen is we've had a few scheduling problems this week. Both of our schedules have been pretty busy, so it's been difficult to get all 4 films in. But what I'm going to do is tomorrow I'm going to record another review for Terminator 3 and Salvation with Tom Woods, who's agreed to be a stand-in co-host, so I will get that review out to you all. I mean, it's a shame that we're not going to see what you have to say on 3 and Salvation, because I know you hadn't seen 3 in a while, but it's just one of them, isn't it? It's just life gets in the way sometimes.
There is literally, I mean, Dark 30 was seen very late. These were seen late. It's been a nightmare. And that's the thing, if Terminator Genisys come out a week later, I'd have got them all seen on time. Because it's just now I've got a bit of time coming at the end of the week. So it's one of them, but Mission Impossible, I'm beginning them next week, although it's like 3 weeks away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to get those in as well. I haven't seen any of them, all 4, so that's going to be a lot of watching time. But yeah, the Terminator 3 and Salvation one I'm going to be recording tomorrow, so you will see that review by the end of the week. Until then, we'll just blame Genisys for messing everything up for us. But yeah, we'll move on to our next segment now, Film Fights. How this works is we take an opponent from the news or from our main show, we throw them together, and we'll see who comes out victorious. It could be a situation, it could be a character, it could be whatever. So today, for our fight, we have from our news with the new director and actor confirmed for Spider-Man. We have Spider-Man versus the T1000. In a fight, who wins? George, you take this one first. I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Right, so Spider-Man's like, 18?
Yeah.
He's going to come home from school, he's going to go into his home, and there's Aunt May dead, Mary Jane dead, Gwen Stacy dead, Uncle Ben's already dead. Then he's just going to start crying like full Tobey Maguire version, and this Terminator is just going to stab him through the face, and his spider sense will tingle, but he'll already be dead.
I can't follow that.
That's how it's happened.
So, wow, okay, that got pretty dark in this one. Have I got to try and defend Spider-Man on this one? Okay.
You can join me.
I probably will, but I want to try and fight in Spider-Man's corner for at least a little bit. Well, you look at some of his rogue gallery and stuff, and he's fought has he fought planet-sized opponents before? He probably has, because he's joined with the Avengers, and they've fought Thanos and stuff. So we know he can take on pretty intergalactic bad guys that seem to have every power under the sun and can't be stopped, but he rises above the odds and he beats them. The T1000 is different because I don't know any other bad guys that can shapeshift into anyone. Thanos doesn't strike me as the kind of person to disguise themselves as Aunt May, for example. But But surely Spider-Man would be able to sense that something's off, or his spider sense might go off before the attack comes in. Because you've got to remember, the T-1000 can only fight with blades, and Spider-Man's agile as hell, his spider sense. We see what his vision looks like in some of the films. It's very slow-mo, especially in Amazing Spider-Man 2. So surely he could just dodge out of the way of all of them, and then he'd find some kind of weakness and exploit it.
No, see, he's got organic web shooters, so that the Terminator's is not going to stop finding him, and then, you know, he'll run out of web, and then he can't hide, and then the T-1000 will get him. Or, if you want me to make it less dark, he can come home and, like, Aunt May's made him dinner, and surprise, Aunt May's actually the T-1000 and kills him.
I'm just going to give more credit to Spider-Man's like dodging abilities and stuff. Like he's been up against villains before where his webs have been completely useless, and this would be another one of those fights where he'd wrap the T-1000 up, but the T-1000 can just phase through anything. So that's not going to pose a threat. Fists aren't really going to pose a threat, so he'd have to find some way of luring the T-1000 to a factory and then burning.
And also, if you're judging off the Terminator Genisys T-1000, it can make spears out of its arms and throw them and shit. So like he's gonna be like hiding in the corner, like crying over Uncle Ben, and he's just gonna get obliterated again.
But also, we're only kind of focusing on Spider-Man in this fight. We haven't really talked about Peter Parker now. We know what an absolute superb scientist he is. So if he got away from the T-1000 long enough, he'd be able to, or like get a sample of it, like he did with the symbiote. Then he could analyse it and find out what its weaknesses are, and then find a way to do it. So you know what? I've actually turned myself around in this conversation. I think I'm fighting for Spider-Man in this fight.
Okay, and then so if you look at Peter Parker, he's gonna, you know, Daily Bugle, he needs his money, he's gonna go in. He's gonna go to J.K. Simmons, J.J. and Jameson. So be look boss, this is this guy that's going around killing people. Surprise! J.J. and Jameson is the T-1000 and kills him.
Oh,
there is,
isn't J.K. Simmons in Terminator Genisys?
Oh, he is!
Oh,
He
please
is.
say he's a T-1000.
Wait, that means we could watch Whiplash.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah, he is in it, but also, that fails, the T-1000 could morph into his camera, and as he goes to take a picture, surprise, it stabs him through the eyes.
No, he can't, because cameras have chemicals, moving parts. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, well that's more transformative, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit. But
I think the Terminator is going to win this one.
your argument is T-1000, change it to anyone, instantly kills Peter Parker. I'm just saying that Spider-Man has... his senses are heightened, he's very agile, he could just like post up
I
on top
dunno.
of a skyscraper and no one could get him.
He didn't... Yeah, the T-1000 was just liquid, and just like wither its way up. But also, if you look at Spider Sense, he didn't sense his uncle was about to die. How did he sense that everyone else has died? Well, no, but like, it's like he's got a Spider Sense. Well, like, why didn't it tell you when the rob was running past it, he's going to kill Ben? It didn't tell you, mate.
Oh, that's the best thing I've ever heard.
That first argument wins because everyone's dead.
Oh.
That's the thing, though. That's what would happen. He'd go just like the T-1000 kills all of John Connor's family. He's going to kill all of Peter Parker's.
Can I just say, this
It's
is one of my
it's a-
favourite film fights we've ever had on this channel.
And also, it's a robot from the future, so it already knows like his weaknesses and his identity and all his family.
Okay, all the evidence is on the table. I'm still going with Spider-Man in this fight. I think he has the edge. I think if we give enough credibility to his scientific knowledge, he would be able to find a weakness. He'd be like Batman, but Batman would get it just instantly because he's Batman. He would find a weakness for the T-1000. He would find a way to exploit this, and he would get rid of him as a threat. I think he's agile enough to dodge all of the T-1000's attacks, even with a gun, because we've established that he does have the ability to dodge bullets. Apart from in Amazing Spider-Man 1, where he gets clipped in the leg, which somehow stops him from swinging. But anyway, that's a review of that. I'm still going Spider-Man in this fight. I know you're not, so this is going to be a draw. So this is going to have to be decided in the comments if anyone's watching this.
Everyone knows the real winner here. He's going to
Spider-Man.
go home. No, but it's even like, oh look, I'm a scientist, right? I'm going to go up to my mate Harry Osborn. Hey mate, can I see your dad? He's a scientist. Need to borrow some equipment. Sure. In the elevator at the stairs, surprise! Harry Osborn is actually the T-1000 that kills him.
Okay, right. We've argued this for long enough. I'm not backing down. You're clearly not backing down. I'm going Spider-Man this fight. You're going T-1000. It's a draw. Comment below. You've got to be the decider on this fight because this is like the fight of all ages. This is an epic clash between good versus evil. We want to know who's going to come out the victor in this. Okay. But this is going to lead on to our recommended movie. How recommended movie works is that each week we alternate picking a film that vaguely ties in with whatever we review in our main show. This week, obviously, it's been Terminator 1 and 2. So, George, it's your pick for this week. You can go sci-fi, for example. You could go with an Arnold link. I know you've said you've got about 5 films in mind, but what have you decided to pick for this week?
So I was going to pick Twins, but I decided not to. But I'm not going to make the mistake of a terrible film like Zero Dark 30.
Yeah.
The editor of the Terminator and Terminator 2 is Mark Goldblatt.
Okay.
He's a very good CV. The film we'll be watching is Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, yes. We talked about this for a few weeks, haven't we?
Yeah,
But
I didn't mean to find this link. I kind of looking at his stuff. I was like, oh, Starship Troopers. Oh, Bad Boys 2. But then boom, it hit me. Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
And I think this was definitely a review we needed to do because in our top 10 films, we talked for about 15 minutes on that, I think, in that review.
Oh, there's so much you can say. I mean, we've talked about it a few times, honestly.
Yeah, I know we've mentioned it in one before and we talked about it, but yeah, I definitely think we need a review on this because there is definitely a lot to talk about and it is one of the best films I've seen in recent years.
Oh, definitely, and I'm happy I found this link. Twins would have been fun.
Yeah.
I will add.
So we've actually got a good film for this week. But yeah, no, that was our main show for this week. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe because we want to build the fan base up. We want to hear what you guys have to say about the movies. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/cinemasavvy or on Twitter at cinema_savvy. Also on Letterboxd where you can find all the lists of our movies and it's a great environment for film fans to get involved in at letterboxd.com/cinema_savvy. As I say, we'll have a Terminator 3 and Salvation review, but that will be with myself and another co-host, Tom Woods. I'll get that recorded tomorrow, and that will be up before the end of the week, before we return Monday for our much hyped up, and we're probably going to be raging against this film. We're going to be bringing you our review of Terminator Genisys. Will it be as bad as we think it will be, or will it be worse? We don't know.
For your consideration, Oscars 2016. Make it happen.
Without a doubt. I'll be seeing it Friday.
Jai Courtney for Best Actor.
Yeah. I'm going to have to try and keep my rage, my hatred for this film probably bottled up over the weekend. And then our review on our main show, as I said, Monday, Terminator Genisys. So that's definitely going to be one to watch. Even if the film's not great, it would be worth watching it for our reactions to it. So, until then, be sure to come back for the Terminator 3 Salvation review and come back Monday as well as for our film club review. So until then, thanks for listening.